Let's just dive right into this explainer and unpack the absolute ultimate study guide for mastering your language teaching exams. The real secret here, it's actually not about memorizing endless grammar rules. No, it's about completely adopting this flawless, highly theoretical mindset. So today, we're going to unpack exactly how to step directly into the shoes of what we call the ideal teacher. Now, the absolute crucial starting point here is completely shifting your mindset. When you sit down for that exam, you've basically got to leave all your real-world classroom frustrations right at the door. Think of the ideal teacher like the Energizer Bunny. Seriously, they just never give up on a student, they try literally every possible teaching method, and most importantly, they never ever humiliate a student or put them on the spot. To build out our ideal teacher toolkit, we're going to follow this straightforward blueprint. First up, the 9 multiple intelligences. Second, the stages of language acquisition. Third, ACTFL levels and communication modes. Fourth, we'll look at the heritage speaker profile. And finally, we'll wrap up with the ultimate exam strategy cheat sheet. All right, let's hit section 1, the 9 multiple intelligences, and really look at how students learn. What is so fascinating about this is how it totally flips the traditional script. The old school method was entirely teacher-centered, right? But the ideal teacher, they are fiercely student-centered. A verbal learner thrives on debates, whereas a kinesthetic learner, well, they physically need to move around. Now, realistically, you can't hit all 9 intelligences in a single class period. But the ideal teacher strategically mixes these activities over a whole unit, so every single student eventually gets to learn in their own way. So let's test this concept with a classic scenario, the kind you might actually see on the exam. Picture this. You have a highly active kinesthetic learner mixed in with quiet, verbal, and intrapersonal learners. What do? Do you force the active kid to just sit still? Do you scrap the reading entirely? Well, the crucial takeaway here is that the ideal teacher never forces a one-size-fits-all approach. Never. Instead, they combine them. You provide that reading activity for the students who really need quiet focus, but you also throw in a role play or some kind of physical game for the student who just has to move. It is all about balanced variety. Moving right along to section 2, stages of acquisition and ACTFL levels. Basically, figuring out exactly where students are in their journey. It's honestly incredible to see how second language acquisition perfectly mirrors a baby learning their very first language. Students naturally have to absorb the language before they can produce it, so they start in pre-production, literally just listening. Then they move into early production with really simple yes or no answers, and eventually they reach speech emergence. And get this, it takes up to 7 solid years to hit advanced fluency. You absolutely cannot rush biology. Okay, let's look at another quick scenario. Imagine you have a student who is completely silent. They're just nodding and maybe gesturing. Now, a traditional, super strict teacher might think, oh, this kid is being defiant, or maybe they're just not paying attention. But what does the ideal teacher see? Well, the ideal teacher knows immediately that the student is in the pre-production, or the silent stage. They are actively absorbing the language, so the absolute worst thing you could possibly do here is call on them and force them to speak out loud. That just spikes their anxiety. Instead, you lower their stress. You bring in clear images, use lots of physical gestures, slow down your speech, and absolutely avoid any confusing idioms or slang. You just let them point and nod until they are genuinely ready. Now, alongside those biological stages we just talked about, we also have the ACTFL proficiency levels. You can think of this as the ultimate can-do checklist for real-world language use. Novice speakers, they're basically human phrasebooks, heavily relying on memorized words. Intermediate speakers can string together simple sentences and survive a pretty basic interaction. Advanced speakers step it up to full paragraphs and can actually handle a sudden complication, like, say, a lost passport. And superior and distinguished speakers, they are practically debating abstract philosophy. And this brilliantly connects all that academic theory directly to practical reality. Because, let's be real, why do we even teach language? So our students can actually use it out in the real world. A novice high speaker can totally rock being a cashier using basic greetings. An intermediate high speaker could easily work as a tour guide. But if you're aiming to be a teacher or a nurse, jobs where you really have to explain complex, totally unexpected situations, you've got to be at least advanced high. The ideal teacher is constantly connecting classroom learning to these exact real-world career goals. All right, section 3, modes of communication. This is all about how students communicate. The absolute crucial distinction to remember for the exam here is directionality. Just imagine a really bustling street. The interpersonal mode is a two-way street. It is dynamic, back-and-forth communication. If two students are texting or having a lively debate, that is interpersonal. But interpretive and presentational modes, those are one-way streets. Interpretive is all about taking language in, like reading an article or listening to a podcast. Presentational is putting language out there to an audience who isn't talking back to you, like delivering a big speech or making a poster. Let's dive right into Section 4, Heritage Speakers. We're looking closely at culture and academic literacy here. You know, heritage speakers are such a unique joy to have in the classroom. They bring these amazing, incredibly rich cultural backgrounds and often just stellar verbal fluency to the table because, well, they speak the language at home. But the ideal teacher recognizes a really specific paradox here. While they might speak like an intermediate high or even an advanced student, they often haven't actually received formal education in that language, meaning they usually struggle with things like spelling, reading, and formal academic writing. So let's test this out. You've got a student who can casually chat with you with literally perfect pronunciation, but the second they turn in their first written assignment, it is just covered in phonetic spelling errors. Do you look at that paper and immediately banish them all the way back to the absolute beginner class? Absolutely not. No way. The ideal teacher does not send them back to square one just to learn how to say hello and goodbye all over again. I mean, think about how incredibly demotivating that would be. Instead, you recognize them exactly for what they are, a heritage speaker. You keep them in an appropriate, challenging level, and you leverage their awesome cultural strengths and verbal fluency to help them bridge that gap to academic literacy and accurate spelling. Okay, bringing it all home with Section 5, the ultimate exam strategy cheat sheet. Let's learn how to decode these questions. So, whenever you find yourself stuck on an exam question, just follow this simple 3-step blueprint to decode it. Step 1, diagnose the student. Are they in the silent stage? Are they a heritage speaker? Step 2, figure out what the test creator is actually trying to test. Is this a question about the interpersonal mode, visual intelligence? And Step 3, apply those golden rules. Always choose the answer that shows endless patience, zero humiliation, and maximum unwavering student support. Let's look at one final super high-stakes scenario to really put the ultimate rule of our blueprint to the test. Imagine a student takes a brave risk, speaks up, makes a noticeable grammar mistake, and the rest of the class laughs. What is your immediate reaction as the ideal teacher? Do you stop the whole class and publicly correct their grammar right then and there? Do you punish the kids who are laughing on the spot? Your very first, and honestly your only priority in that exact second, is the affective filter. The absolute most important rule of the ideal teacher is to protect a student's dignity, period. If you publicly correct them or make a huge scene out of it, their stress levels skyrocket, their affective filter goes way up, and chances are they will never ever speak in your class again. Instead, you casually validate their attempt, keep the stress super low, and then you address the negative behavior of those other students privately later on. This exact response brilliantly captures that relentless, totally supportive energy of the ideal teacher. We don't just ignore mistakes, right? But we frame them as the actual stepping stones of language learning. You have to be that Energizer bunny, radiating positivity, validating every single effort, and showing the student that you are 100% committed to their success. So as you gear up for your exam and, ultimately for your future classroom, I really want you to think about this. Yes, sure, the ideal teacher is technically a theoretical construct meant to help you pass a multiple-choice test. But what if it's actually way more than that? What if, by striving for this perfect balance of understanding multiple intelligences, totally respecting the natural stages of language acquisition, and fiercely protecting your students' dignity, you actually create magic in your classroom? Are you ready to step into the shoes of the ideal teacher?